The world before Adam, the Bible's hidden civilization. Genesis chapter 1. It's the story of the beginning, the creation of the heavens, the earth, and the very first man, Adam. It's a story most of us have known our entire lives. But what if it's not the whole story? What if the Bible itself, in its own words, drops clues about a world that existed before Adam? A world with its own people, and a cataclysm that nearly erased it from history. The clues to this lost civilization are hiding in plain sight, and tonight, we're going to uncover them. Section 1. The known story. For thousands of years, the accepted story has been pretty straightforward. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Over 6 days, light, land, and life are spoken into existence. The story peaks in Genesis chapter 2, when God forms Adam from dust, breathes life into him, and declares him the first man. From Adam and Eve, all of humanity is said to follow. It's the foundation of the human story as it has been taught for millennia. A direct line from a single, specially created couple. It's simple, it's profound, and it's the bedrock of doctrines like original sin. But what if a single verse, right at the start, throws a wrench in everything we thought we knew? Section 2. The anomaly, the crack in Genesis. The first major clue appears just one verse in, Genesis 1:2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Now, let's just pause and ask a critical question. Why would a perfect, all-powerful God create an earth that is without form and void? The original Hebrew is tohu wa bohu, a phrase dripping with chaos, desolation, and emptiness. This verse has sparked a controversial but fascinating idea known as the gap theory, or the ruin reconstruction theory. This theory suggests there's a massive, unrecorded gap in time between the first and second verses of Genesis. Verse 1 describes an original, perfect creation. Then, according to the theory, something catastrophic happened, which left the world in the ruined state we find in verse 2. Proponents point to the Hebrew word haya, translated as was. They argue that in other parts of the Bible, haya can mean became. If so, the verse could read, "And the earth became without form and void." This translation opens the door to a lost chapter of history. It's important to know, however, that this is a heavily debated translation. The overwhelming majority of Hebrew scholars and Bible translations render the word as was, arguing the verse just describes the raw, undeveloped state of creation before God got to work. But if we follow that breadcrumb trail, we have to ask, what could have possibly caused the earth to become a ruin? Section 3. The investigation, searching for echoes of destruction. To hunt for an answer, we have to look outside Genesis, to prophets who wrote centuries later. Our first stop is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 4. In a startling vision, Jeremiah says, "I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens were fled. A fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord." The language here is an exact mirror of Genesis 1:2, without form and void. Jeremiah describes total devastation, but he includes a stunning detail. He saw cities that were broken down. Cities imply a civilization, people, a world that was populated before this destruction. Mainstream biblical scholarship is clear that this is a prophetic vision, using the language of decreation to warn of the future judgment coming for Judah's sins. But gap theorists ask a different question. What if Jeremiah wasn't seeing the future, but was being shown a vision of the distant past? The exact cataclysm that left the earth tohu wabohu. This idea seems to get a boost from Isaiah 45:18. Here, the prophet says God created it not in vain, He formed it to be inhabited. The Hebrew word for in vain is tohu, the very same word from Genesis 1:2. So, Isaiah says God did not create the world tohu. This appears to be a direct contradiction. If God didn't create the earth as a chaotic waste, why was it in that state? Again, the standard interpretation is that Isaiah is speaking about God's ultimate purpose for a thriving world, not commenting on its initial state. But for an investigator, it's another piece of evidence that suggests the perfect creation of Genesis 1:1 was ruined, and the story we read from verse 3 onward is actually about its restoration. Is this challenging what you've been taught? Let us know what you think in the comments below. We really do read them all, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next investigation into the Bible's hidden stories. Section 4. The investigation, populating the lost world. If a world existed before Adam, was it populated? A couple of clues in Genesis have puzzled readers for ages and might just point to a pre-Adamic population. The first is in Genesis 1:28. In the classic King James Version, God tells Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. The prefix re makes it sound like they were supposed to fill the earth again, implying it was filled once before. However, this is just a quirk of language evolution. In 17th century English, replenish simply meant to fill, not to refill. Modern translations use fill to reflect this. So, while it's an interesting thought, this clue doesn't hold up. But our next clue is much harder to dismiss. It's the mystery of Cain. In Genesis 4, after Cain murders his brother, God banishes him. Cain's reaction is very telling. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. Who is he so afraid of? If the only other people on earth were his parents, Adam and Eve, who is this everyone he thinks will kill him? On top of that, the Bible says Cain went to the land of Nod, found a wife, and built a city. Who was his wife, and who were the city's residents? The traditional explanation is that by this time Adam and Eve had other, unnamed children, and Cain was afraid of his own extended family. After more than a century, they could have multiplied quite a bit. This is the most widely accepted and plausible interpretation. But the pre-Adamite theory offers a wilder alternative. Cain was terrified because he was being exiled into a world already populated by other groups of people, the survivors of a race that existed long before Adam. Section 5. Connecting the dots. The ruin and reconstruction. When you put all these clues together, a dramatic, speculative narrative takes shape. It goes something like this. In the deep past, God created a perfect heaven and earth, as described in Genesis 1:1. This world was inhabited, maybe by angels, maybe by a human-like race. Some theories connect this period to the fall of Lucifer, suggesting his rebellion is what brought ruin to that first world. This led to a divine judgment, a cataclysm that destroyed that original civilization and left the planet flooded, dark, and chaotic. The state of tohu wabohu in Genesis 1:2. Some even speculate this ancient cataclysm could account for the fossil record in dinosaurs, placing them in a world before Adam. It is critical to state, however, that there is no direct biblical or scientific evidence to support this link. Then, in Genesis 1:3, the clock restarts. God begins a new project, a 6-day reconstruction of the ruined planet. He creates new life and finally, a new man, Adam, to be the father of our current age. This, the theory concludes, is why Genesis speaks of a world that became void and why prophets recalled a destruction that left cities in ruin. Section 6. The dark side of a theory. As compelling as this narrative might seem, we have to talk about its very troubled history. The idea of pre-Adamism, humans before Adam, isn't new. It was first seriously proposed in the 17th century by thinkers like Isaac Le Pereire. But in the 18th and 19th centuries, this theory was twisted into a doctrine used to justify racism and slavery. Proponents argued that only Adam's descendants were truly human and that other races were descended from inferior, pre-Adamic beings. This abhorrent misuse of the theory is universally condemned and has been rejected by modern theologians and scientists alike. Any honest look at this topic has to include that dark historical context. Conclusion and the big question. So, what are we left with? We have these anomalies in the text. A world created without form, visions of ruined cities from a distant past, and the lingering questions about who Cain was so afraid of. These have led to the gap theory, a speculative but fascinating attempt to make sense of the biblical text in light of questions about deep time and a world before our own. But let's be absolutely clear. This is a theory. It is an interpretation, and it is not supported by mainstream biblical scholarship. The Bible does not explicitly describe a pre-Adamic civilization, and the gap theory challenges core doctrines like the origin of sin and death coming through Adam's fall. The traditional view that Genesis 1 describes a complete creation out of nothing over 6 days, and that Adam was the very first man, remains the foundation of historic Christian faith. But the questions are still there, whispering from the margins of the text. So, is Genesis 1 the story of the absolute beginning, or is it the story of a new beginning? A world raised from the ashes of another. The Bible doesn't give a final, explicit answer, leaving us to wonder, what else might be hidden between the lines? If you want to keep exploring the hidden histories and deeper mysteries of the Bible, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. Thanks for watching.